I remember that week before Christmas like it was painted in warm, golden light. The smell of pine drifted through my apartment, clinging to the corners like a promise. Outside, the neighborhood lights blinked in uneven rhythm, some stubborn. Bulbs refusing to glow, others twinkling like they had a story to tell. I'd make my way to the window each evening, pressing my nose against the cold glass, tracing the snowflakes as they fell lazily from the sky. Everything felt familiar, cozy, safe. I'd curl up with a mug of cocoa in my hands, the steam curling into the air like little whispers, and let myself sink into memories of Christmases past. Grandpa's laugh echoing through the living room as he wrestled with tangled strings of lights. The way he'd insist I taste the cookies even before they'd finished baking, smearing powdered sugar across his mustache just to make me laugh. Those moments were stitched into the fabric of my childhood, a patchwork of warmth I could always find again if I closed my eyes. I remember thinking how much I was looking forward to this year's visit. The rituals, the quiet chaos of the kitchen, sneaking extra marshmallows into my cocoa when Grandpa wasn't looking. I could almost feel his hand on my shoulder, that gentle squeeze that meant, I see you. I'm proud of you. And yet, underneath it all, there was this tiny, almost imperceptible flicker, a nagging feeling that something might be off. I shrugged it away. Grandpa had always been a little unpredictable, a little stubborn, but that was just him. Nothing to worry about. The apartment smelled faintly of cinnamon from the candle I'd lit, and I could hear the soft hum of the heater keeping the cold at bay. I sipped my cocoa, letting the warmth seep into my chest. My eyes wandered over the decorations. The tree in the corner, slightly lopsided but glowing with strings of yellow lights. The ornaments reflecting the soft light like tiny, frozen stars. Presents piled underneath, neat stacks with carefully taped bows. Waiting for the morning excitement that always came too fast, I leaned back against the sofa, letting the quiet settle around me. Snow fell in soft, muffled silence outside, the world feeling small, intimate, and safe. I was just content, looking forward to Christmas with Grandpa, to sitting by the fire, to the smell of cookies and pine, to the way his stories always felt like they were just for me. And in that quiet contentment, I didn't notice the small crease forming on my mailbox in my mind, the tiny, almost imperceptible sense that maybe something was about to shift. It was late afternoon when I noticed the envelope, tucked under the usual stack of mail like it was trying to hide. My name was written in Grandpa's unmistakable, slightly shaky handwriting, the kind that always made me smile because it carried so much of him in every curve of the letters. I picked it up slowly, turning it over in my hands. The paper was thick, smooth, familiar, the kind he always used. That I slid my finger under the flap, half expecting the usual holiday card with a cheerful Merry Christmas and a note about his latest stories. But when I unfolded it, my stomach dropped. The words were short, clipped, and colder than I had ever imagined coming from him. Don't try to come for Christmas. I blinked, thinking maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me. I read it again, and again. The letters didn't blur or shift. They were as firm and immovable as the snow piled against my window outside. That I sank onto the sofa, letter in hand, trying to make sense of it. Don't try to come for Christmas. Just like that, a simple instruction, a line so absolute it felt like a wall had risen between us overnight. My mind started spinning, replaying every conversation I'd had with him in the past months. Had I missed something? Did I say the wrong thing? Was there some silent frustration I had ignored, thinking it was just Grandpa being Grandpa? I could almost hear his laugh echoing in my memory, warm and teasing, and the contrast with the words on the page made my chest ache. I remembered last Christmas, when we sat by the fire and he told me a story that made me laugh until I cried. I hadn't thought, even for a second, that anything had changed. My hands shook as I held the letter, and I think I even dropped it. Once, staring at the floor as if the words might dissolve if I just ignored them long enough. But they didn't. They were there. Stark. Cold. That I wanted to call him immediately, to hear the sound of his voice and maybe, just maybe, convince myself it was some kind of cruel joke. But something held me back. A small voice in my head whispered, maybe he means it. Maybe you should just respect it. So I did the only thing I could think of at that moment. I texted back, short, clipped, emotionless, understood. My thumb hovered over the send button for longer than it should have, and when I finally pressed it, It felt like the final click of a latch, sealing something I wasn't ready to let go of. I sat there, staring at the blank phone screen, my mind echoing with memories of warmth and laughter that suddenly seemed like a lifetime ago. Outside, the snow continued to fall, quiet and steady, indifferent to the storm that had just settled inside me. After I sent that text, I sat there for what felt like hours, staring at the screen as if the phone might whisper some hidden truth back to me. It didn't. Just the little notification bubble mocking me with its silence. My fingers tingled, and I could feel a strange, hollow weight pressing against my chest that I kept replaying the moment over and over. The letter, the words, Grandpa telling me not to come. Don't try to come for Christmas. The coldness of it kept hitting me in waves. At first, I tried to rationalize it, to convince myself it was temporary, maybe written in anger or confusion. Maybe he was having a bad day. Maybe this was just one of those grandpa things, the kind I should have laughed off. But every instinct screamed otherwise. That I remember pacing the apartment, the soft hum of the heater unable to drown out the chaotic thoughts in my head. I could hear the faint crunch of snow outside and the muffled jingle of a neighbor's Christmas lights swinging in the wind. The world outside kept moving, indifferent, while inside I felt frozen in disbelief. That I caught myself imagining what could have gone wrong. Did I upset him without knowing it? Did I say something foolish during our last phone call? Or had I simply misread everything? The warm words, the laughs, the stories, all meaningless in hindsight? I hated myself for even thinking that, but I couldn't stop. The more I tried to justify it, the more it felt like I was spinning, tangled in questions with no answers. Flashbacks came uninvited. I saw him laughing last year, his eyes crinkled at the corners, a piece of cookie dangling from his lip as he teased me. I remembered the fire crackling in the background, the scent of pine and cinnamon filling the room. That memory, once so comforting, now felt like a cruel contrast, a reminder of what I was suddenly being denied. I picked up the letter again, tracing the edges with my thumb, almost desperate for some warmth, some hint that it wasn't real. But the paper was cold, the ink firm. It wasn't going anywhere, and neither was the ache in my chest. I tried to push the feelings down, to pretend I was calm, but every breath seemed heavier than the last. I found myself talking aloud, to no one in particular. What did I do? Why would he? The words dissolved into the quiet apartment, and the only answer was the echo of my own voice. That I looked out the window at the softly falling snow and felt an odd mixture of numbness and anger. Anger at myself for feeling so lost, anger at him for shutting me out, anger at the universe for letting something so warm and familiar turn so cold. And yet, beneath it all, there was a fragile thread of hope, stubborn as the snow outside. Maybe this could still be fixed. Maybe. The next few days blurred together in a haze of uncertainty. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart jumped, hoping it was him reaching out. But it never was. Silence became a weight pressing down on me, a constant reminder that something had shifted, and I didn't know why. That I found myself questioning everything I remembered about our last interactions. Had I misread his tone on the phone? Had I laughed too loudly at a joke he didn't find funny? My mind kept running these tiny, almost insignificant moments over and over, dissecting them like clues in some cruel puzzle I could never solve. Maybe I missed it. Maybe he was hinting at this all along. I thought, biting the inside of my cheek until it hurt, trying to force some clarity into the fog. Walking around my apartment, I couldn't shake the sense of being on edge. The hum of the heater sounded too loud, the ticking of the clock too deliberate, each second mocking me with the passage of time I couldn't control. I would catch myself staring at old photos of us, Grandpa's crooked smile, the way he'd ruffle my hair, the faint gleam of mischief in his eyes, and a knot would form in my stomach. How could the person in these memories be the same one who wrote me that cold letter? Flashbacks intruded in the quietest moments. I remembered last summer, sitting with him on the porch as he told me about his childhood winters. He had a way of painting pictures with words, making every little detail vivid. The smell of fresh snow, the crunch under his boots, the warmth of a fire inside. That version of Grandpa, full of life and gentle humor, felt impossibly far away now. As if someone had quietly erased him from the world I thought I knew. I started questioning the reality of everything. Not just his words, but the memories themselves. Had I really experienced them the way I remembered? Or had my mind glossed over tension, over small cracks, in favor of nostalgia? The thought made my chest tighten. Was I losing him? Or had he always been slipping away, and I was? Just noticing now, even the small routines felt off. The smell of pine in my apartment no longer brought comfort. The lights blinking outside seemed cold, almost mocking. I would pace, unable to sit still, gripping the mug of cocoa I barely tasted, staring out at the quiet world and wondering if I was the only one feeling the emptiness. And yet, amid all this confusion, a stubborn hope lingered. Maybe he had a reason, some explanation that would make sense once I understood it. Maybe he wasn't pushing me away forever. I clung to that thought like a fragile thread, even as doubt gnawed at its edges that I realized that I had entered a strange, liminal space, somewhere between memory and reality, hope and despair, love and fear. And in that space, I felt more alone than I ever had in my life. After days of circling the same thoughts, I finally gave in to the urge to reach out. My fingers hovered over the phone screen, hesitating. I typed a message, erased it, typed another, and deleted that one too. Every word felt either too heavy or too light, and nothing seemed like the right way to bridge the sudden chasm between us that I wanted to call him, to hear his voice, to listen to that familiar warmth behind the words. But even as the idea crossed my mind, a cautious voice whispered, "What if he doesn't want to talk? What if this just pushes him further away?" So I waited. I paced the apartment, the dim light from the street lamp outside casting long shadows. Across the floor, the quiet felt unbearable, filled with the echo of his absence. Flashbacks arrived unbidden, small, sharp fragments of memory that cut deeper than the letter ever could. I saw him sitting in his worn armchair, the fire crackling behind him, a mug in his hands as he told a story that made me laugh until I couldn't breathe. I remembered the way his eyes twinkled at the punchline, the way he'd nudge me gently when I laughed too hard. And then I remembered last year's goodbye, the hug that lingered just a second longer than usual, and the faint ache that had stirred in my chest even then. Finally, I sent the message. Not knowing if he would reply, I typed, "Hey, I just wanted to check in. I hope you're okay." My thumb hovered over send for what felt like an eternity before I finally pressed it. The little vibration of the phone in my hand was louder than it should have been, almost deafening in the silence of my apartment that I waited and waited. Each tick of the clock made the room feel smaller, tighter, the air heavy with the absence of his voice. I tried to fill the silence with the hum of the heater, the occasional creak of the floorboards, the faint rattle of wind against the windows, but nothing helped. The apartment felt emptier than it had in years. Even though all the lights were on and the tree was decorated just the way I liked it, I imagined him receiving my message, seeing my name flash on the screen, and choosing not to respond. The thought hurt more than the letter itself. A part of me wanted to get up, grab my coat, and show up anyway, even if it meant walking straight into rejection. Another part whispered that I had to respect his boundaries, however cruel they felt. And so, I sat there, alone with my thoughts, clinging to the hope that he might reach back, that maybe there was still a thread of connection left to pull us together. The snow outside continued to fall softly, indifferent and steady, while inside, I felt suspended between hope and fear, love and uncertainty that I didn't sleep much that night. The apartment was quiet except for the soft hum of the heater and the occasional distant siren from the street. But my mind was loud, alive with memories I couldn't turn off. They came in fragments, uninvited, like a slideshow of a life I thought I could always return to. I remembered the way Grandpa used to hum Christmas carols as he wrapped presents, the tape sticking to his fingers and his glasses fogging up as he laughed at his own clumsiness. I remembered the smell of cookies baking in the oven, the rich warmth of chocolate and cinnamon that seemed to fill every corner of the house. I could almost feel his hands, rough and warm, guiding mine as we decorated the tree, making sure every ornament found its perfect place. Flashbacks came harder, sharper. I remembered last winter, trudging through knee-deep snow to his porch, my boots squeaking and my cheeks burning from the cold. He opened the door before I even knocked, his smile bright under the dim porch light, and the warmth of that hug, the kind that made the world feel safe, hit me like a punch now. I remembered the fire roaring in the fireplace, his voice telling stories of winters long before I was born, the way he drew me in with each word, making history feel personal, intimate, that I could see him in those moments, laughing at my jokes, teasing me about my terrible attempts at baking, the sparkle in his eyes that always made me feel like I mattered more than anything else in the world. And yet, here I was, sitting alone, the echo of his absence filling the room in a way that made the walls feel closer, tighter. Even the small, seemingly insignificant memories hurt. The way he'd tilt his head when listening, or the quiet pause before he offered advice, as if weighing every word carefully, or the way he'd sneak a peppermint into my pocket when I wasn't looking, just to see me smile later. All of it rushed back, overwhelming me with nostalgia and a deep, gnawing sense of loss. I tried to hold on to the warmth of these memories, tried to let them comfort me, but they were bittersweet. Every laugh, every hug, every smell and sound I recalled now carried the weight of absence. The memories weren't just happy anymore. They were reminders of what had been withdrawn from me, the intimacy suddenly barred by a simple, cruel letter. I sat on the edge of my bed, hands trembling, slightly, staring at the Christmas lights reflecting off the window. The world outside was quiet, snow falling softly, and I realized that no matter how vivid my memories were, no one could bring them back. They existed only in my mind, a flood of warmth and pain that left me soaked in longing. The days that followed felt like walking through fog. I tried to distract myself with work, with friends, with the mundane routines of life, but the letter lingered, a quiet shadow in every corner of my mind. And then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, small details started surfacing, little things I had overlooked before, like tiny puzzle pieces clicking into place. I noticed the missed calls he'd left weeks ago, buried under old notifications. I remembered the way his voice had sounded, just a fraction quieter than usual, on the last phone call we shared. The pauses, the subtle hesitation in his words. They hadn't made sense at the time, but now they felt like a warning I hadn't recognized. I found myself going through old emails and messages, looking for something, anything, that could explain it. And there it was, a brief, almost casual mention of health issues he had been dealing with, ones he had never wanted to talk about. My stomach dropped. Could that be it? Was he keeping me away to protect me from the worry, or from witnessing something painful? Flashbacks hit again, sharper this time. Last winter, he had walked slowly to the mailbox, leaning on his cane, smiling and insisting he was fine when I could see he wasn't. The memory cut like glass. I hadn't wanted to see it then, and maybe that was part of why I couldn't understand the letter now. That I felt a mix of emotions swirling inside me. Anger, hurt, confusion. Anger that he had hidden so much, that he had kept me at arm's length, without a word. Hurt that I hadn't noticed sooner, that I hadn't done more to help. Confusion because the man I knew, the one who had always been warm and present, now felt like a stranger making choices I couldn't understand. And then a quieter, more subtle emotion started creeping in, realization. Maybe this wasn't about rejection. Maybe it was about love, in a way that hurt to comprehend. Maybe he was trying to shield me from something he thought I couldn't bear. The thought was infuriating and heartbreaking all at once. I wanted to shake him, to demand answers, and, at the same time, I wanted to hold him close and tell him I understood, that I would have been there anyway. Visual cues haunted me. Empty prescription bottles on the kitchen counter in my memory, the quiet echo of his footsteps when he moved slowly around the house, the faint smell of medicine mingling with pine and cookies. I realized then that the world I had been inhabiting, the warm, safe memories, had been only one layer of reality. The layer underneath, the one he had carried quietly, was heavier, more complicated, and it had shaped this letter, this sudden wall between us. That I sank into the sofa, exhausted. The weight of understanding pressing down on me. Anger, hurt, and love all tangled together in a knot I couldn't untangle. The letter wasn't just a refusal. It was a boundary wrapped in layers of fear, protection, and unspoken truths. And for the first time, I felt like I was seeing him clearly, in all his flawed, human complexity. That I didn't need another letter to know what I was feeling. It was in every quiet corner of the apartment, in the hollow ache that sat behind my ribs. Hurt, frustration, and a gnawing sense of helplessness tangled together in a way that made even breathing feel heavy. I found myself pacing the room, running my hands through my hair, muttering aloud to no one, as if saying it would somehow unburden me. Why? Why would he do this to me? I would have. I would have been there for him. The fire in the corner crackled softly, but it didn't warm me the way it used to. I sat down on the sofa, letter in hand, tracing the edges with my thumb, thinking about all the Christmases we'd shared. All the small moments that had felt so eternal now seemed fragile, almost unreal, slipping through my fingers like sand. Flashbacks hit hard. I saw him, sitting in his armchair, shaking his head at one of my bad jokes, the way he'd chuckle anyway just to make me feel seen. I remembered him offering advice, the way he leaned forward, hands clasped, like he was sharing a secret meant only for me. And now, none of it mattered. Or so it felt. The letter had become a wall between us, one I couldn't climb, one I couldn't knock down with words or gestures. Anger flared, sharp and immediate. I wanted to scream, to call him, and demand answers, to shake him and say, I would have come. I would have been there. You don't get to just shut me out like this. But the moment passed, leaving only the echo of frustration bouncing off the walls. I realized that shouting, arguing, confronting him directly wasn't going to change anything. He had made his choice, and for reasons I didn't fully understand, he had drawn his line. And then, quietly, beneath the anger and hurt, a different feeling began to creep in, tentative understanding. Maybe he was protecting me. Maybe he was struggling with things I couldn't see, trying to carry a burden alone. The thought was infuriating and comforting at the same time. I hated that I couldn't be part of his struggle, hated that he had to shoulder it alone, but at the same time, I could see why he might have tried that. I sat there for a long time, the letter crumpled in my hands, staring at the glow of the Christmas lights reflecting off the walls. I didn't have words for what I felt, a mixture of heartbreak and empathy, frustration and love, loss and connection. I could feel the tug of memories, of all the laughter and warmth, and it clashed violently with the reality of his absence. The room was quiet, except for the fire and the soft patter of snow against the window. I realized that confrontation didn't always mean a fight or a shout. Sometimes it was just sitting with your feelings, letting them wash over you, messy and unresolved, and trying to hold on to the parts of love that still mattered. I let out a long breath, shaky and uneven, and for the first time in days, I allowed myself to acknowledge the complexity of what I was feeling. Hurt didn't have to erase love. Frustration didn't have to erase understanding. And even in the silence, even in the wall he had built, there was room, just a little, for both of us to exist in the same world. The first moments of acceptance came quietly, almost imperceptibly. It wasn't a sudden epiphany or a dramatic aha moment. It was more like a gentle exhale after holding my breath for days. I realized that the letter, as painful as it was, didn't erase everything Grandpa had given me. It didn't erase the laughter, the lessons, the countless small moments that had shaped me. It was a boundary, firm, perhaps misunderstood, but still a form of care in its own way. That I started to let myself remember the warmth without letting it sting so sharply. I could picture him in his armchair, sipping cocoa, telling me stories I already knew by heart, and instead of a pang of loss, there was a subtle smile forming in my chest. I allowed myself to imagine his reasoning, that maybe he was protecting me from worry or from seeing a side of life that felt too heavy. It didn't make the hurt vanish, but it softened the edges just enough to breathe again. I found solace in routine, in small gestures that connected me to him even from afar. I decorated the tree a little more thoughtfully, lit the candles, brewed cocoa, and let the familiar scents fill my apartment. The snow fell quietly outside, covering the world in white, indifferent to my turmoil, yet somehow comforting in its constancy. I walked through these rituals not to replace him, but to honor him, to keep our shared history alive in the small ways I could control. Flashbacks still came, but I let them arrive without resisting. I remembered him sneaking peppermint candies into my pocket, the fire crackling as he told stories, the way he'd gently ruffle my hair instead of pain. These memories carried a sense of gratitude, a recognition that love isn't always about presence, that it can exist in memory, in rituals, in small acts of remembrance. That I also began to reflect on myself, on my own growth. The letter forced me to confront feelings I had been avoiding, The discomfort of helplessness, the sting of rejection, the raw edge of missing someone deeply. I realized that processing it wasn't about getting him to change or to explain. It was about me, about learning to hold my emotions without letting them consume me, about finding peace even when circumstances didn't bend to my desires. I sat by the window, watching snowflakes drift lazily to the ground. I felt a fragile calm settling over me. It wasn't closure. Not yet. But it was a start. I understood that I could carry him in my heart, honor the bond we shared, and still accept that sometimes love doesn't look the way we expect. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's distant. And sometimes it's wrapped in a letter that tells you not to come. And maybe that's enough for now. The day finally came when I felt the heaviness in my chest begin to shift, just enough to breathe without wincing at the thought of him. I realized that closure wasn't about changing the past or rewriting the letter. It was about accepting the reality of it and learning to carry the love I still had, even from a distance. I sat by the window with a steaming mug of cocoa, watching the soft snow cover the world outside in silence. Each flake felt like a small reminder of time passing, of life moving forward even when it hurt. I picked up a pen and wrote a note. Not to send, but for myself, a letter to Grandpa that I may never give him, filled with gratitude for every memory, every laugh, every quiet moment we shared. I wrote about missing him, about understanding him, about how his presence shaped me even when he wasn't physically there. Flashbacks came one last time, vivid and unrelenting, but instead of pain, they carried warmth. The smell of pine, the crackling fire, the sound of his laugh, all reminders that our bond was real, enduring, and mine to hold. I let the memories wash over me without clinging or resisting, savoring the way they made me smile even through tears that I realized that moving forward didn't mean forgetting him or pretending the letter didn't sting. It meant embracing the love we shared in whatever form it could take now. I could honor him in my own ways, by keeping traditions alive, by sharing stories of him with those I loved, by carrying pieces of him in my heart even when he wasn't physically present. Outside, the world glistened under a thin layer of snow. Lights twinkled from houses across the street, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a quiet, steady rhythm in my chest, a fragile peace that wasn't dependent on anyone else. I knew I would always miss him, but missing him no longer felt like a trap. It was part of loving him, a testament to the bond we shared, unbroken by distance or circumstance. That I placed the note on the mantel, next to a small ornament he had made for me years ago. I didn't need him to read it. It was for me a symbol of reconciliation with my own heart. I sipped my cocoa, watching the snow, and allowed myself to feel both the ache and the gratitude simultaneously. Love didn't vanish with absence. It evolved, quietly, persistently, like the snow continuing to fall, soft and unyielding. And as the day faded into evening, I understood that this was what moving forward looked like, carrying the past gently, honoring the present quietly, and stepping into the future with an open heart, even if the person I loved most wasn't by my side.